Moment. Will I do this if it'll let me? There we go. And we are streaming. So I will hand it off to you, Robert Bob.
Good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Police Reform Commission. We have a pretty lively agenda tonight, and without any, I'd like to get right into the agenda, Blaine, after we have roll call.
Yep.
We have a lot to cover, and I'm hoping that members of our commission will be, actively involved in tonight's discussion, and more importantly, the fact that we will have updates from the various committees of the commission. And I'd just like to say on behalf of myself and my co-chair, Christy Lopez, is that, we've been very, very impressed with the dedication, with the details, work of the members of our commission. It has been and continues to be a very rich experience for all of us. And I'm totally convinced that at the end of the day, we will provide a report to the district, to the city council, and to the district that will lead to extensive police reforms here in our community.
All right, so I will do a quick roll call. If you could just let me know that you're here or present, that would be great. Robert Bob.
Present.
Christy Lopez.
Here.
Elena Bell. I don't know if I see her. Robert Bennett.
Present.
Kent Bass.
Present.
Samantha Davis. Do not see at the moment. Tina Front.
Here.
Pastor Delonte Golston.
Here.
Herb Gray. I don't think I see him. Emily Gunston.
Here.
Ron Hampton.
Here.
LaShunda Hill.
Here.
Corwin Knight.
I'm here.
George Lambert.
Present.
Jeffrey Richardson.
Present.
Naike Savane.
Present.
Yes. Oh, yep. There she is. It's like, I know I saw her somewhere. Sultan Shakir. Don't believe it's on. Mignon Smith. Let's see her. Patrice Sultan.
Here.
And Kurt Vondren. And Kurt, I see you. So you're good. All right. I think.
Here, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Wrong button.
Christy, did you want to start doing the updates, have committees start doing updates? I didn't know how you want to approach that, but I'll let you take over.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if there's that much to do. We can just start with the first committee if we've got someone here who's ready to do that from our policing youth community. LaShunda, you're here. You want to do that?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So the Policing Youth Committee has been in the process of refining our recommendations like the other committees. A couple things that are notable. This week we'll have, we are participating in an alternatives panel, alternative to policing panel, that'll include a discussion of alternative to policing practices related to youth. And then in February, I got my dates mixed up, but our February meeting will include a panel of educators or people who work in the education space to talk about some of the district programs that partner with MPD that focus on school safety, such as the Safe Passages program. So we really look forward to hearing from them, as well as the school leader that Commissioner Hampton recommended from Anacostia as well. So that's our quick update. And I don't believe Sultan is on. So I can also provide a quick update about violence reduction as well.
Okay. Before we go there, does anyone else from the Policing Youth Committee have anything to add? Okay. So Sure, let's do the Violence Reduction Committee. Lashenda, you can continue with that.
Yeah, really quickly, and Jennifer, you can jump in if I forget anything, but the Impact Justice team, Jennifer in particular, has been really great in scheduling follow-up conversations with some of the agencies and experts here in the district that we've talked to before, like the One's office, to get some more information on how their work can be incorporated into our recommendations. Similarly to the Policing Youth Committee, we're in the process of refining our list of recommendations, and I'd like to give a shout out to Jennifer in particular for all of the work that she's done in organizing the recommendations and working with Sultan and I to really create sort of buckets and themes for the types of recommendations that the Violence Reduction Committee has developed. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for your support on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Our whole IJ team has been really fantastic, providing them really excellent support. Okay, anybody else have something on the Violence Reduction Committee they want to add? All right, Committee 3, building up community responses to community challenges. I don't remember what the exact title is. Who's that? Who's the chair? Which chair wants to talk about that?
That's Herb. Is he on? He's not on, right?
He is not on, not at the moment.
Pastor Delante might have to tag team this with me then. We've still been meeting weekly and exploring recommendations around non-police responses to behavioral health crises in particular, and also substance abuse as well. So we're sort of marching through recommendations that we've received from researchers and behavioral health services providers in the district. And Blaine, could you help me with what our next meeting is, or Impact Justice, sorry.
We're meeting with Director of the Department of Behavioral Health, Dr. Bazron, on this coming Thursday. And then the following Thursday, we're meeting with Wanda Gaddison and maybe one or two of her colleagues from the Office of Unified Communications.
Oh, right, Office of Unified, yes. So in particular, we'll be able to answer some questions we have about the logistics of what it would be like to have people call first responders that are not police, and how that dispatch could work effectively. And
Yeah,
if anyone else from the committee wants to jump in, please do.
Yeah, for people who are listening who may not know, OUC, Office of Unified Command, is basically the 911 call center. And so that will help redirect calls to people who can respond to crises, and Department of Behavioral Health has been running the mobile crisis units who could be an alternative to police response. Pastor Delante, do you want to add anything, or anybody else from this committee?
No, those are the main buckets. I wanted to make sure, those are the main items I wanted to make sure we're covered with that we have the meeting coming up with Dr. Bazron. And I don't know, Patrice, did you mention the research that we've been doing on the CAHOOTS model and where we are with that as well?
I could say more about that. So CAHOOTS, as Pastor Delante mentioned, is a program out of Eugene, Oregon. There are several other programs like it out of Colorado, Washington State, and elsewhere, where people other than police are dispatched to respond to emergencies that don't require an armed response. And so we've been doing some research around how each of those programs works and the kind of funding that each program requires, and how we would be able to effectively replicate that here.
Yep. Anything else? Okay, so Committee 4, reforms to MPD practices.
Hello again.
Yeah, or NIK, either one. I don't remember who's.
No, NIK's on 5.
Oh, yep. Sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we have been focusing on different policing tactics in many of our meetings. So we spend a lot of time talking about Search warrant executions this week, we're going to be focusing on pedestrian stops and stop and frisk practices in DC. That meeting is tomorrow at 5:30. And on February 2nd, we'll be focusing on traffic stops. We're also looking at training and recruitment recommendations. One thing that we haven't done in our group is to have sort of a standalone community listening session. And in part, it's because we have so many topics to get through every week that it's hard to cover each one and have time for a separate meeting. So I'd like to encourage anyone from the public to actually attend those meetings and participate in the chat, or to reach out to the commission to talk to us about any suggestions that you might have on any of those things.
I have a question, Christy. Maybe Patrice could just give a couple of nuggets with respect to the warrants issues, given the fact that, that becomes somewhat of an issue nationally in some of the problems that we've had. So.
Yeah, so I think at the last meeting, we talked about how one thing that was revealed as we talked about search warrants is the lack of data collection and reporting from the police department. They don't have systems in place to pay attention to what they're applying for, what they're obtaining, what they're executing, what they're recovering. And so there's really no way to measure whether what they're doing is on balance, making us more safe or less safe, right? We can measure the harm that's been inflicted by them executing these search warrants, but we don't have any way of saying whether it's done anything to help them solve investigations or otherwise prevent crime. Another thing that we heard from a speaker last week, sorry if somebody could remind me of her name, who gave us more context about Breonna Taylor's case and everything that happened there, and shared a lot more details from that case than were reported widely. And so it was helpful to see through that case study what changes we could make to search warrant practices here in the district. And
Her name, by the way, was Sequika Reynolds.
thank you, George. Anything else that you wanted me to add on search warrants, or anything else that you wanted to highlight there?
No, I'm good. I just want to make sure that that's it's a topic, and we had what I thought was a very excellent presentation that George arranged with one of his colleagues from Louisville, Kentucky, with respect to the Breonna Taylor murder. And so, and that basically, at least my takeaway from that tragedy was the way that the search warrants, in fact, were issued and carried out.
Okay, thanks, Christy. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, thank you, Patrice. Anyone else want to speak about panel 4? I'm sorry, committee 4. Okay, so the last committee, last but not least, now NIAK, MPD internal and external accountability.
Thank you, Christy. And Pastor Delante, please join in if there's anything you think I'm missing. So since our last meeting that we had, our first meeting in January was really just to sort of come back together after a few weeks apart and try to catch up on things that we had been discussing prior to the end of the year. Then we had a community listening forum on the 14th, where we were able to hear from, I believe, 8 other members of the community who weren't able to speak with us in December. So it was really enlightening. One of the things that was enlightening but also a little frustrating was that one of the participants, who'd been an ANC commissioner for years, said he had no idea about the Office of Police Complaints, or that it even existed, prior to doing his research for our meeting on the 14th. So that was pretty concerning, obviously, because that's one of the few mechanisms that we have for accountability for members of the public to make reports and to make complaints outside of MPD. So that was just something that really came to light that day. It was quite frustrating. Then last week on the 21st, we had a meeting with Greg Pemberton, who is the head of the police union here in DC. He expressed that the union supported some of the measures for reform, but really was opposed to 5 out of the 19 subtitles. The one that he focused the most on was subtitle L, which covers eliminating bargaining over discipline. So the union is not in favor of that at all. They're also categorically opposed to transparency regarding police disciplinary records. So we were able to go back and forth a little bit on that, but they're pretty adamant that, at least he was pretty adamant that it would make the district a less appealing place for officers, for high quality officers to apply to become officers in the district. So that was something that he was quite strict about. We are having this coming week, we'll be hearing from one policy advocate and one lawyer in DC from PDS and the ACLU of DC. So we'll be hearing about body worn camera footage and I believe one other thing, but I'm forgetting, it's slipping my mind. So Bethany, remind me if you know. But they'll be speaking with us about that. And hopefully after that, we'll be able to move forward with continuing our plans and our recommendations on internal and external accountability for MP. Pastor Delante, anything I missed? Or Bethany? No, okay, I think that's it.
Thanks so much, Nike. So before we move away from the committee updates, is anybody else from the commission, do any of our commissioners or any of our IJ staff, or anyone have anything else we want to make sure the public is updated on that we've been doing in terms of the committee work? Okay. We're also continuing to meet with city officials, with other advocates, with community groups to, as sort of ancillary, we often have people from different committees meeting with people because obviously a lot of issues apply to more than one committee. Okay, so if we're done with those updates, Blaine, if it's okay, can we turn to Commissioner Front and have her tell us about some of the updates on the work that she's been doing? We did have, so everyone knows, we had a presentation from Rights for Girls, I think it was 2 weeks ago, where they talked about a bill that they're working on. And we're fortunate enough that one of our commissioners is with Courtney's House and is actually the founder and the executive director of Courtney's House and has been working with Rights for Girls. So I'm hoping that Tina, that you can provide us some information about not only that work on that bill, but also what you've been seeing in this work recently.
Okay, so I want to first start off by just reminding everyone I work with boys and girls ages 11 to 24 who are sex trafficked. So not everyone over 18 is considered a sex worker. You can be trafficked over the age of 18. So that's something to remember, especially about the language that we're using when we're updating bills and such. So with that being said, my only population is sex trafficking. That's it. So that's it. We actually are the ones that have the numbers for DC and confirm trafficking amongst youth in foster care for DC as well. So with that being said, since the pandemic, before the pandemic, our percentages were 32% of our youth are sex trafficked by their families. So let's go over that again. 32% of our youth are trafficked by their families here in DC. Since the pandemic, that went up 5%. So I work directly with CPS, have a contract with foster care and the youth division sex trafficking unit. So most of my calls are coming from the side of CPS for parents. So complaints around the neighborhoods and communities of parents that might be trafficking their children. Or it will also come as maybe abuse, right? And sexual abuse. And then we help determine if it's trafficking or not. The next thing is 85% of my population is African-American, 15% is Latina. After the Latina population, they're all female. They're all under the age of 15. They're all MS-13 and 18th Street Los Locos, which are the main trafficking gangs on the Latino side as well. With that being said, on that note, we want to talk about kind of where are people going when they're trafficked? Where are the trafficking hotspots and the areas where they're going? So the number one places, people tend to use the same hotels over and over and over again. So 2 hotels, I can't tell you the names, but I can just tell you there are 2 hotels in Prince George's County on the lower end that most of the youth, most of the adults are taking people in Prince George's County. That's because you can rent rooms still with cash and not having all the proper identification. So that would be that. Baltimore would be the second place, especially for underground stripper parties. Remember, I work with boys and girls. I have a small population that defined as LGBTQIA. Most of the girls do, and not my boys. My boys are defining as straight, under the age of 16. And their trafficking situations are all white males with high positions. So that may mean that, yes, there have been cases recently where there are a doctor, a therapist, and they were trafficking some of our youth in our program. Or a current case as well, where there was a lawyer. He's been a family court lawyer in Prince George's County for over 20 years. He also bought homes in predominantly African-American areas and reached out to the boys. So my boy population would be the boys that you all see every day but ignore. The boys who are begging to help you with your groceries at the grocery store. The boys who are asking to pump your gas station at there. Those boys also, and we don't think about boys, right? These men can move into these neighborhoods because they're just helping them. They're targeting them, knowing that they need help, and that's how they enter the trafficking situation. Now, the sadder part is our numbers for cases. So are these cases being tried? If we have these many parents that are trafficking, what does that look like? So we don't have any case right now at all on the parent side of trafficking that's being moved forward. And that is because of the way, and I'm sure in the case, she could tell you, that's the way the law set up. If a child has to tell and recant a story over and over again, most of our children and youth, family members are all involved in their life. So all of them, their sisters, their mothers, their cousins. So now I have to tell them my whole entire family, and now who do I have to support me? So I think we forget about that and the impact and the trauma within that. So those are why I'm so busy. We're very, very busy at Courtney's house, to the point where we actually had to get some emergency funding to hire more staff. We have a waiting list right now of like 46. My biggest complaint during the pandemic is the pedophiles, the parents, the abusers are just about all out of jail or awaiting trial, who sold their children. They're not in jail. Our youth, on the other hand, we're getting charged with other charges, assault, even though a trafficker told them to commit a crime. And they have been in YSC and the juvenile detention here and in jail. So we've been very busy kinds of, and even though we have the youth division, you all, the people that are arresting the youth for our traffic, because it's not just trafficking, they're coming in on other crimes. And that's going to be the homicide division and the robbery division. Because remember, when you're trafficking someone, you can make them do all sorts of things. Why wouldn't you? So I think that's the biggest issue, is that because it's not just in the trafficking unit, all the other police are still holding them. They care more about the case, not understanding trafficking. Like in one case right now, quickly I'll say this because it doesn't make sense to me. Yes, there was a youth who was setting up a man to be robbed in the alley after the man bought sex from her. She's 14. They didn't charge the man for buying sex from the 14-year-old. However, she is African-American and they want to put her in jail, not the grown adult who's in his 30s who orchestrated everything. So this is what I'm saying. When we think of trafficking, we don't understand everything else that it gets connected to, and people not understanding that. They will, they don't still see them as victims at all. So honestly, that has picked up a lot. We have been working very hard with getting people out of YSC because of these. So that's been going on. Any questions? It's a lot of information.
I just want to quickly thank you for pointing out that I used the wrong terminology in a really egregious way, right? There's obviously a big difference between sex work and being sex trafficked. And I'm hoping, and that has a big implications for the response to it. And there are differences in the bills that are being introduced, although Rights for Girls was really helpful in helping to explain how sometimes those lines can blur, right?
Yes.
But it's really important to keep them separately. So thank you. But can you talk a little bit about your perspective on the Rights for Girls bill and what you've been working on, the revision of the policy that you've been working on with them, and what the implications of that would be and why that's important for sex trafficked individuals in particular?
So first I want to say, I may be a survivor of sex trafficking, but it's really not about me. It's about our youth and what they want. So Courtney House created a youth policy group because they wanted to help write the bill and say what they wanted. So actually they helped draft this bill. And our youth policy group, the difference would be this. Our youth, when we came up with like pro-sex, not pro-sex, I don't like to push my own opinions of what I feel because I need to talk back to our youth that we work with to see what they feel before I push anything. I can't speak for them. I don't agree with that. So with that being said, all of our youth believe that it was not sex work for them, right? In their situations, they were all forced in their situations. So not only were they not forced, even as adults, because I was an adult as well, and just because you were trafficked since you were 10 years old and the day you turn 18, you were a sex worker. Like that's not how realistically it works. So they actually testified during audio. And I pulled some of that for the testimony. I'm sure Blaine can do that, pull everything so you all can hear their recommendations and what those recommendations were for that. So here's what the bill said real quick, and this is what we believe in. One of the biggest part of the bill that we disagree with, it is that it would legalize brothels. So what that means that if you have an apartment, right, and you want to legally sell yourself out of your apartment, you can, because there's no license. You don't have to have a license for that. The problem with what our youth said, remember that percentage I just told you of our youth that are being trafficked by their family? So who's gonna help them get out that house? Or even the adults. So we had another youth who's 19, and this guy, this pimp, was holding her in DC, locking her in a house. Deadbolt law. So that's the other thing, like if we did that and legalized, there's no way to monitor it. The very important part of this bill too, that's actually harming of this bill, is there's no services for anybody who's in the life. There are no services. You cannot get your record expunged. Why not? You can't get your record expunged in this bill the way it is. There are no resources or money resources in this bill at all. So there was a huge gap. So what we're saying is a partial decriminalization. We're saying partial. We do believe buyers should go to jail. In this bill and that bill, buyers don't go to jail. And the reason why is that you can't say that this buyer who bought sex from a 26-year-old today did not buy sex from a 12-year-old yesterday. You don't know that. There's no way of you telling that. However, I've been working with the youth division, Courtney's House, and we've been working for actually a number of years where we have created where buyers do get arrested and our youth who are minors can point them out and say who had sex with them so that they can be charged, because it's actually a lower rate of men who are buying sex for minors where they're not even being charged. So that's the other issue within it. Also, they're predominantly white males and the youth are predominantly African-American.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of that's kind of, you can hear the kids again and hear what they had to say at the bills and the recommendations. Yes.
I have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, Commissioner, I have two quick questions. One is, what is the funding level that's needed to for Courtney House to get to a level where you believe it's at a level to support the work that you all are doing? And then my final question is for us as a commission, are we going to take your recommendations and embed those recommendations in one of our committees, as it were, so that we can move forward with whatever amendment to be an advocate for the changes that you would like to see? And then my third one is, the 3 hotels in town that I assume they're all in the district, and if so, they're not in the district. Okay.
They're in PG. The houses are in the district. And
Okay.
youth division, and I was gonna talk about that in one of your answers. I actually work very close with a lot of information. So Courtney House keeps a database of pimps. So say youth division or one of the police call me, which is almost every day, and they'll say, Tina, have you heard of Pimp PC? And we can look and they'll say, hey, Tina, do you know this girl? Or do you know? So we get to do a lot of research, have a huge database. We need somebody, like that should be a paid position that they should be paying us since they're calling us for information that they don't have. You see what I'm saying? Like you're calling me for info that you don't know how to obtain or get. So definitely we had a research department that does that. We teach different law enforcement, not just DC, around the country actually, how to set up the Instagram accounts. We work with FBI all over this area to also teach them what sites there are and to go after the traffickers and buyers and not the people in the life. So on the back end, we give a lot of information, and that's because our youth trust us, give us a lot of information of the trafficking schemes that they normally wouldn't know, the police. So we would need at least another 650,000 to take people off, hire enough staff to do that. We are a 24-hour service. I don't know if you all knew that, but I am 24 hours. I wish we got calls in the daytime. That'd be amazing. It never happens. And so we have an emergency hotline. And then we help the police go pick up and like get people when they're in emergency situations. So we need more 24-hour staff that we can just have 24-hour staff and not always have to use them in the daytime too, right? Development person, we forget about that. Like we have to keep getting grants continuously. And I write grants. So I write grants with my staff. I help. We have 2 survivor service coordinators. Those are our case managers who are licensed. We all pull in, we all help. I do cases. So we need enough money that I can do my job is getting the others and we can do the case management. It's just so much work to be done. The other thing you may not know, the last thing to answer that question, there are 70 organizations in this DMV area that work on some sort of trafficking. Did you all know that? Inside or outside the United States, we are the only African-American run, survivor run, the only. So the issue is there are other anti-trafficking organizations, but they usually can't keep the youth because the culture competency issues and just really not that connection that we provide. So that would be the other gap in it. I would love to tell you that in the anti-trafficking world, there is no racism. Everybody loves everybody and we sing songs and dance together. It's not true. You know, it's very difficult being one African-American doing this and a survivor. I'm being dead serious on that. I have to make sure all the policies, but it's not the money, it's not the same. So, and we do the work. So that's actually the hard part as well, making sure and meeting with that they're not keep giving the same money to the same people who aren't doing the same thing. And everybody that does a nonprofit know it, say hallelujah. Yes, Ronald.
Yeah, hallelujah. Look, I want to, the question I have is, what is the excuse of the charging people when it's obvious that 2 crimes have occurred, but they just want to charge one person rather than the person who, rather than the John? What is the reason or the rationale coming from not charging them?
You know, I got some great lawyers on here because we could have some, we've had long conversations about this, but I'll tell you this, and this is how this works on the buyers. So I don't use the terminology John. I want to tell you real quick why I don't, as being in the life. Do you all know how the word John was made up? How it was invented? It was invented by police, and it was invented by police to hide the names of men who were buying sex to protect the families. So people in the life say it for, you know, the police to make y'all feel better. That's not what we say. So I'll be nice and say buyer. So with that being said, I will say this to that. What happens is I have a current case, can't give a lot of details, but again, with this man, he was robbed. Okay. He bought sex from a 15-year-old. The police aren't charging them for that. So the thing is with that again is just focusing on a crime and I'm just gonna be honest, you asked me, so you're gonna get honesty. It's also African-American youth we're talking about, because I have youth who are Caucasian. They never hit the judicial system in DC. They didn't come through Hope Court in DC. Their families called me, their therapists referred them, and that's how they came to us. So it's very different when you're talking about race as well.
Yeah. Okay. So we could I think there's more to unpack there and talk about. We probably do need to move to our impacted residents panel, but thank you so much, Tina. And I encourage commissioners to follow up with Tina directly if you have any questions, and we'll certainly be considering that bill and some of the other things that you said tonight and that we know in previously as recommendations. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of that information with us.
Thank you.
Blaine, do you want to help us bring in the panel and get that started?
I'll actually hand it over to Bethany for that.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Bethany.
No problem. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for joining tonight. We are going to head into what we're calling our Impacted Residents panel. We're going to hear from three women who are with the Center for Family Life Services Speakers Bureau here in DC. And please correct me if I'm mispronouncing any names. We have Grimaldi Francesca Sanchez, Crystal Marshall, and Beverly Smith Brown. So I'm going to ask them to, in the order I just read your names, to introduce yourselves and talk to the commission a little bit about your experience of public safety or not feeling safe in the district and what your vision is for improving public safety here. And thank you again for being here. And I also want to thank, Joseph D'Antonio from the Center for Family Life Services, who worked with us to arrange this panel.
Thank you, Bethany. And thank you to the commission for allowing me to be here to speak today. My name is Grimaldi Francesca Sanchez, and I am a Ward 7 DC resident. My experience with the police has been good and bad. The bad experience that I've had with DC police is when I was at a time homeless and working late at night. I was in the warehouse district close to New York Avenue. And several times getting there at like 1 o'clock in the morning to start work, I would be asked, like, where are you going? Oh, you're going to work. What type of work are you doing? And all of this just by first being Black, secondly being trans, and then next being a woman. That is the thing that I always have to deal with when I am facing DC police, and those feelings just always come to me. However, there's always been good experiences as well, and I don't want to undermine that. One time I was mugged, and the police were so helpful to me. They used the correct pronouns. They made me feel safe. We hold the police to a very high standard of ethics because of the power that we entrust into them. And with that, we want to make sure that they're able to deal with all types of people, no matter their personal biases that they have and the biases that each of us know that we all have with each other. What I think is very important is that we remember that it is very hard right now being a trans woman, not only here in DC, but just in America. And we're being killed at a very rapid rate. So it's so important for the people that we entrust to protect us, that we feel a certain sense of responsibility that they have toward us and safety. One of the things that I think would be very, very important is for police to undergo bias training from actual trans women so that they know and can ask questions like, okay, how do I know this? Or if I don't perceive a person to be of the experience that they're saying, how do I deal with that? I think by educating and answering questions like that, we can really help to bring us more together and to have that safety and trust. Another thing that I think is very, very important are for the police to be able to identify mental health challenges that someone may be going through. And with that all of them go through some type of mental health certification. I think that would be very, very important so that they really know how to identify that and then how to also execute them in a way that is not aggressive. With that also, that they go through mental health trainings and also have that mental health preparedness for themselves so that they can deal with whatever issues and challenges that they have. I think doing all those things, we can really help to change the attitudes that a lot of us have toward the police here in our community.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Can we hear from Crystal Marshall next?
Good evening. My name is Crystal Marshall. I'm going to say it again because that's how I was trained by the Community Family Life Services. My experiences of incarceration and my involvement with the police is something that is ingrained in my soul. It's something that I still, at this moment, have sweat beneath my underarms. It's so scary. It's trauma even being pulled over for speeding these days, because about 20 years ago, I was incarcerated for indiscretions of my youth. Now, as a survivor, a Black woman who is on probation, who is trying to be successfully a part of society these days, I don't know where the line is. So what I mean by that is police are, by design, placed in our communities to help us. They're placed there to be that big brother, big sister. We rarely feel that. For my research to speak tonight, I asked a lot of members of my community what they wanted the police to know. And basically, it came down to, why do you think you're better than me? I'm not sure if it's social economic disparities. I'm not sure if it's where you live, how you were brought up. But I wanted to just take this moment and say to everyone that's listening, the police in London don't carry guns. Guns kill people, not people. Guns kill people, not police, not actual people. It's got to be a force behind that trigger. If you remove the feelings, the trauma, the scaredness, then the gun can't operate itself. So I guess for me, my 4-minute speech about changing the world, I would center it around, let's put down the guns. They did it in the past. They're doing it at this moment. Please, 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 just help us change the way police are seen. If we change the image, I got a radical idea just now. How about you let felons be in the police force? Maybe after they serve their time and maybe after they did their probation, they already can't find a minimum wage job as is. We reintegrate them into the society into the system. I've been taught from the beginning of my incarceration into my release to trust the process. Maybe we need to create a new process. I want to thank you very much for your time. And I want to say hey to my cohorts, Beverly, and the most new one from the Community Family Life Services, DC Central Kitchen, and there's several nonprofits that have had they give me an opportunity, but I've taken this opportunity to kind of like speak my truth. So I want to thank you, Community Family Life Services, for giving me this opportunity, and the nonprofits that I've dealt with, giving me this opportunity to be here tonight. Crystal out.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. And now we have Beverly Smith Brown.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Beverly Smith Brown. I am a proud member of the Community Family Life Services Speakers Bureau, Cohort 1. And hello to everyone. And Crystal, this is really an opportunity for me. Really is surreal because when my story really goes way back, when I was 9 years old, I had my first experience with the police and gun violence. I grew up in Southeast DC. I'm number 8 of 9 children. Back when crack cocaine hit the community, it hit my family hard. I remember getting up in the middle of the night, having to use the bathroom. And I heard a bang on the door and just, bang on the door. I opened the door and I have guns in my face. It's the police. And they're looking for my sister's boyfriend. And in my mind, he's not there because when I went to sleep, he wasn't there. But nonetheless, they pushed in. I ran to my mom's room. Our apartment was like 2 apartments made into one. So we had this real long hallway. My mom's apartment, well, not apartment, her bedroom was all the way at this end and ours was at that end. So I ran that way, only to hear gunshots, and later found out that my sister's boyfriend was shot and later he was killed. That really changed the way I looked at the police. It really did. Fast forward, a whole bunch of stuff happened in the middle of that. Of course, I'm a part of the Speakers Bureau, so I had my run-in with the police with just drugs. Like I said, when crack hit, it was an opportunity for me to make some money. My mom started smoking crack at one end, and we were selling it at the other end of the house to try to keep the money in the house. So, the run-ins with the police was often. At first, it wasn't that bad when the jump outs would come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays because they never would touch the females, so they would kind of give us the stuff to hold. But that quickly, once they realized, hey, the females is in on this too, right? So it was one of those things of me kind of understanding community helpers, right? You talk about community helpers in school, you have your police, you have your postal worker, your nurse, your teacher, all these people that you can trust if you need something. Well, that I felt like maybe I was on the wrong side of what was going on. And I went through the period of feeling like, I was the bad guy. So that's why all of that stuff happened to people. But then as time went on, I saw that was not the case. That wasn't always the case, right? So it was really mixed things that was going on. I really want to speak about the importance of the body camera, right? I've had so many situations where if they had one had the camera, but he didn't have it on. So the importance of having that body camera on is really, really would have helped a lot of my cases as it relates to just what you call a search and seize or whatever they do, and just over policing, like slamming me on the car, just being rough, extra rough, just because of how I looked in the community that I was in. Because like I said, I had those up and down situations where, I was raised in a certain environment where that was just the way we lived. And as I got older, I realized that, that was not the right way. But again, like I said, still having those run-ins with the law. I remember one time in particular, I went to my daughter's house. I was taking her to the grocery store on Southern Avenue. She lives on Southern Avenue in Southeast. And I pulled up so she can unload the groceries, and the police came harassing me. Like, you can't park here, you got to move your car. My daughter just had her baby. So the baby, my granddaughter was like maybe 4 months old, still in a car seat. I don't really want to go in detail because it's almost like a trigger for me. But it was very unnecessary what they went through to get me to move my car, like literally threatening me in front of my daughter. She had just moved into her apartment. I was already afraid for her being on that side of town, and just seeing how the police was to us just unloading our groceries. And when I wasn't blocking any traffic or anything, he just wanted me to do what he wanted me to do. So, again, to be in this position to talk about the importance of body cam, I hope whoever is in charge of that, or, the powers that be, can hear the cry that there's a lot that go on as it relates to just over policing. You know what I mean? Just like excessive force. And then this last story, I'm gonna end with this. Recently, I am also the founder and executive director of Mama Safe Haven nonprofit organization, and we work with people that was traumatized by gun violence, particularly mothers, grieving mothers who lost their children to gun violence. We have just recently, DOES has a new program, the Youth Internship Program. And Mama Safe Haven, we've been working with DOES for 6 years with their summer youth program, but this year they started a program for the youth 14 to 21 to work during the school times, 6 hours a week. So we had our first Zoom last week and it just threw me back this year. I only had one male on the call. We had 5 girls, 1 male. And the first thing it was just an open discussion. I'm just trying to get to know the youth. And, one of them was like, I don't know what's inauguration? It was on inauguration day. They didn't know what it was, right? And so the young man stated, my 2 brothers was killed by gun violence. My stepfather was killed by gun violence. And he said he's afraid of the police. He said that the police grabbed and slammed him on a car. And he said he's afraid. When he see the police, he don't know what they're going to do next. And he's only 16. He has a bright future. I mean, this young man is so intelligent. And the way he, expressed himself and it was just really disheartening because it took me back to my childhood and what I went through and how they say that we have to trust the police. And I want to, I see Mr. Hampton on, how you doing, Ron Hampton, who is a former police officer. There's some police officers that we can trust. There's some good police officers and I know some, but I think that, it has to be across the board. So I'm fighting for them to keep their body cam on all the time. So thank you again for giving me this platform to speak. And I hope that helps someone.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing your remarks and for the work that you all do. We want to open it up to commissioners to have more of a conversation with you. So I'd invite commissioners to ask questions of Ms. Sanchez, Ms. Smith-Brown, and Ms. Marshall.
I would like Ms. Sanchez to speak a little bit more with regard to the type of training that she would like to see at the Police Academy if that training is not. I mean, we should confirm that that training is not being done, but I would like for Ms. Sanchez to expand on the type of training that she would like to see at the Police Academy.
Yes, I will. So I'm sure that the Police Academy or whatever trainings that they do, they go through a bias training. I'm sure that's in there somewhere. What I think is important is when you're trying to when you're trying to understand a certain community, I think it's very important for you to actually have members of that community there to actually engage with and speak. Like we're here right now, engaging and learning from one another. I think that that's very important. So I think that there should be a bias training specifically, perhaps just by trans community members that can be put together that allows an interaction between the police to really understand the things that trans women fear from policemen and also how they can better interact with them when approaching them. Because they're not always going to approach a trans woman because they're undergoing sex work or in a negative regard. It could be simply as they have to come to their home because they have to go to the hospital and the police always comes when an ambulance comes. And then they're misgendering a person right there just because of what they see there or what they are, their perceived notions. Again, the other training that I think is very, very important is that mental health training piece. I think that it's very, very important for them to be able to identify and be able to engage with the community in a non-aggressive manner, especially as it pertains to someone that may be going through a mental health episode. And furthermore, make sure that they're getting the proper mental health treatment themselves.
Thank you for that. It's something that we should follow up on as a commission.
I have a question for Ms. Smith Brown. It's okay. I was wondering, you mentioned that there are some officers that you trust. And I was wondering if you could tell us what it is about those officers that you trust, what officers can do or be that makes them trustworthy. And I hope you're still there. Well, we'll have to follow up later, Ms. Smith Brown.
I do want to acknowledge and thank all of those who've joined us and sharing comments with us tonight. I have a question, but I do want to use it as a moment perhaps to underscore something we've talked about earlier, and that is really training. I've still been very much a strong component of doing more around de-escalation training as well. We did hear from one officer that came before us and mentioned that perhaps he thought that there should be more time spent invested in it. But my sense is that it should be in-service training. So not training that when officers go to the academy or they're initially entering the police force, they get it one time and that's it. The world continues to evolve. And so, something that's maybe done periodically, maybe, a couple times a year, a quarter or whatever, that is some form of in-service training with all of these trainings. So whether it is for mental health, whether it is for de-escalation, any of those, that we really take a hard look. That may be one of the things we were going to consider, getting a very good sense of the number of hours invested in their training. And it's a training that's done more than just one time when you come into the force.
I agree. I think that's important. I have another related question. Sometimes the training, my understanding is the MPD officers are supposed to get training, but for whatever reason, it doesn't happen. So for example, if the Department of Behavioral Health isn't available to give crisis intervention training on the day it was meant to, then that cohort of officers may just not get that training in the academy. And that's not the way it's normally done. And I'm fairly certain that, for example, if officers didn't qualify on their firearms, they would not be allowed to graduate. And it seems to me there should be some other types of training, the types that Ms. Sanchez was talking about and that you're talking about, Mr. Lambert, that you just can't, it just has to happen. And I'm wondering if there's a recommendation we can make that, if it's on the books, this training that the officers are going to receive, that there's some way to ensure that they actually receive it. Otherwise, it's a bit of a farce and a disservice to the officers, as well as obviously the community.
And then maybe an idea to that then is making sure that the training is recorded, so then it can be embedded to part of their video trainings as well, so that they're always making sure that they're still trained.
When the police have their training, do they ever see firsthand some of these folks who are transgender? I mean, do they hear from them? Because the image you might have without seeing some of these folks is much more negative than it may turn out to be. And I just wonder if the police will ever invite and talk to these citizens who are in, say, that category of people.
There was a time when MPD, there was a lot of community work that went into for many organizations to have it so that community organizations, especially with the LGBT community, were actually going in and doing some of that cultural competency training down at the academy. And the mayor's office of LGBT affairs is very much involved. I'm not sure what the status is at. I think we've still been waiting to hear on what the exact sort of training curriculum and the set of community organizations that are actively engaged now. But I think that's one of the big issues, because that previously the only pathway for that had been for those organizations who had that formal relationship and were invited in for a day. There'd be a particular day and a particular hour, and they were invited in to do their block. And similarly, I can say from having the experience that if there was a crosswire and nobody was in the room that day, oh, well, sorry, you weren't necessarily getting a date to come back. And when you came back, it wasn't for the set of folks that should have been there on the day when you were coming. It was whoever happened to be there on that day. So I think one of the things on the accountability piece is sort of, you know, it just goes back to that again, makes me think of who audits on the training side. Is there any entity that audits sort of that, the schedule and what has been set as the standard, and actually who showed up and what they received? Is there any entity that does that within MPD? Have we figured that out? Is there anybody that does that?
I've been trying to figure that out for years. Let's find that out. That's actually good. And it needs to be in there about that accountability. Are they taking it? Is there a list of people like that didn't have trainings that need to, or can they make it a thing maybe every 6 months, you still got to redo it or something?
When I was in LA, I was a part of an LGBTQIA task force that the second in command in the LAPD assembled, and that task force would meet monthly, and different members of the LGBTQIA community and allies, which is how I was brought in, would come in and advise the chief around the training schedule, would figure out what those blocks would be, and would do research on inclusion from around the country and offer models to that end. So I really appreciate Ms. Sanchez for bringing up this community-led model. I have the same questions because I don't know if there's a similar task force within MPD. I don't know what, if there is such a task force, what that task force is charged with. I'm hearing from Brother Richardson that it sounds like the mayor's office has been charged with that, but it would be a lot more impactful if it was actually within the department itself and actually community led. I do know that I know Community Shoulders. I know Brother Jay Brown has done some community-led trainings. He's another Ward 7 resident. I know he has done some community-led trainings within MPD, but again, it has not been specifically from the trans lens and perspective. So that's something that's definitely needed. I did have one question. I don't know if Beverly is back. Beverly, are you back? Okay, she might have stepped off, but I'll come back to my question for Beverly a little later on.
I can follow up on your comment, Pastor Delante, or my understanding, I know that MPD has a LGBT liaison unit, and they actually have trans officers who work with MPD and work with that unit. But what I don't know is the answer to Ms. Sanchez's question, whether as part of training for officers, they include, and this is also Mr. Bennett's question, they include people from these communities directly to have face-to-face conversations. And even if they do, to the point Jeffrey and Tina were making, I don't know if they actually make sure that happens. And so I think we have to really make sure that we're asking the right questions and that we're finding the right solutions. Because I think like they do a lot of things that are sort of almost there, but then like the last minute they veer it the other way, and all that work doesn't seem to actually get delivered. So I think that's part of what we have to do, is to answer those questions on in this particular topic.
And for my
thought
research,
these 3 witnesses were impressive. I mean, and it just seems to me that the police in training should, particularly, I felt the first witness was very impressive, and I think it could affect things if policemen saw her and talked to her, and their images of might well be changed. I don't know, maybe that's a pipe dream.
If I may, the panels tonight have been extremely impressive. And I know that we are the Police Reform Commission. But when I listen to the panels tonight, I listen to Tina, I listen to the other panelists, I have to wonder how all of this is connected in terms of making our community better, not just from the police standpoint, but for all of the agencies of the district government that also impact, that connects with the services that are needed in addition to the, the issues of the police. So, but I know we're the Police Reform Commission, but when you listen to the panels tonight, it just seems to me that there's a broader connection to the services, to the training, to the discussion that we're having with respect to how does the city government overall connect with these programs so that it's police, it's social services, it's mental health. How do we create that mosaic, as it were, for beyond the work that we're tasked with as a Police Reform Commission? Because the panel discussion tonight goes, it focuses on the police, but the services that are required goes beyond just the police department, or the connection to those services are beyond the police. It's I hate to be cliche-ish, but that old village, someone said, but it's
a village.
We have to figure out how do we connect beyond our commission. But it just seems to me that part of the frustration is that there's just so many experts doing great work in the city to make us better, but it has to be connected beyond just the police.
It's all compartmentalized, it seems to me, and got to be connected.
Ron?
Can I share something?
Yeah.
I'd like to share a little bit of something that I sort of realized a long time ago. First of all, let me say this, that there was a time, in my time when we were on the police department training, there was a regular cycle of training. And not only at the academy, but regular in-service training that took place in the police districts. And some of the, I remember when Richard Pennington was the district commander in the 7th district, he worked very closely with the gay and lesbian community in Ward 8. He worked very closely with the Korean business community in Ward 8. And then when he went from the 7th district commander to head of community services or community relations, then the department benefited from that, and there were regular in-service trainings with individuals from those communities. So when I hear that between now and then, we don't, the department doesn't do that anymore. But again, I'm not surprised that it doesn't do that anymore, but that was clearly, that clearly took place in the past, and that training was a regular, and that they could tell you what the training was. They could tell you what officers would come back and do, what they call experienced officers training after you've been on the force, say, for 5 years, and then there were reoccurring training cycles for different officers, depending on what your job was and whatnot. So that existed then. Obviously, it doesn't exist now, and they haven't focused on that. But I wanted to finish up by saying this, because it always bothers me. This bothers me in the sense that I think what really the issue is, and this goes to something that Bob was talking about, I think we train police officers to do, no, let me back up. Officers do exactly what they're trained to do. I want to tell you that they do exactly what they're trained to do, because the training the training method is about what we see manifest officers' behavior in the street. And if we want them to be different, then we need to see them different. we train individuals to be police officers, ultimately creating them against a process. But if we wanted to educate officers and train them to be guardians, when they came out of the police academy or education academy, they would behave very different. And the items that they take wouldn't be maybe it wouldn't be firearms training, maybe it wouldn't be how you drive a car 100 miles an hour and keep it on the road, but it would be how you communicate, how you treat people, how to de-escalate, a whole host of things. So it's frustrating to me that we talk about this and then go to the training. And I want to tell you, having gone through all of that, police officers do exactly what the training trains them to do. If you want them to do something different, then you need to design a training or education model that will produce what it is that you want them to do. Other than that, tinkling around the edges of the training academy is not going to get you where you want. And that's something that, well, as Bob is talking about, if you want them to be this product of this mosaic member of our society that is about the welfare, the guardian, taking care of people, living up to this whole notion that we're here to protect, that they say they are, well, then you have to change the way that they're training and who you recruit into the police department. If not, then they're gonna come out doing the very same thing that they've been doing all along. And this isn't the first conversation about tinkling with the training and all the other things that go along with it. And yet we still see the same thing over and over again. And I'm not being negative, I'm just reflecting and making an observation. Because I think the solution is in, again, designing a training model that will produce what it is that you want in an individual. And we might even want to change their name. We may not even want them to be police. Maybe we want them to be guardians. And so if they're going to be a guardian, then it has to have a new mission, a new vision. And that individual comes out and then does something altogether different, working with the agencies in our community. But if you continue to tick around the edges of it, then it's going to be exactly what it is right now.
And to Ron's point, I'll just note, so MPD in some of their performance oversight answers to council, they have talked about some of the training that they offer still. And on the LGBTQ front, they do offer training to new recruits. It's the training that was developed with a bunch of different LGBTQ organizations locally. But ongoing training is basically a supplement and pretty much optional. So they just say like additional refresher training or training on emerging issues in the LGBT community is provided to as a supplement and is delivered online or during roll call. So to his point, it's like you're tinkering around the edges with this because LGBTQ folks, I mean, yeah, you get recruit training, but then after that, it's like it's kind of put off to the side.
I mean, removing the word optional, like it's optional if they want to know. It should be maybe different stages so they have to, and it's required that they have it, but optional.
I know there were a couple questions for Ms. Smith-Brown. If we want to, Christy and Pastor Delante, repeat your question.
Hi, Pastor Delante. Sorry, guys. I had another Zoom life.
Oh, no, you're good, Beverly. Good to see you, sis.
Yeah, good to see you as well.
No, I just wanted to just to see if you could offer to the commission your other hat as an interrupter and kind of share a little bit with the commission what some of the non-policing alternatives are that you've seen that have been effective, that actually prevent folks from having the experiences that you had coming up and that so many of us continue to have, because as you mentioned in your testimony, jump out is very real. Even today in our community, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I can go down the street from my house on Division Avenue and, and we see them out here. And so obviously our commission is interested in finding not only ways to reform or but to not just to reform, but to transform the way that policing is done. And so to rely on intervention and prevention specialists such as yourself to begin to grow capacity around that work is a very important part of that. And so I know that you have multiple hats that you wear, and you know, so I wanted to invite you to bring that particular hat in. Are there any recommendations that you have in your own work with Mama Safe Haven and with the Alliance of Concerned Men around how prevention and intervention work can replace some of the work that that MPD is currently doing?
Well, thank you so much again for that question, because I didn't mention that, but I am, so let me just clarify. I do work for the Alliance of Concerned Men. I have my first role, I'm no longer working in that violence prevention piece, but I was a first responder. We were responding to crime alerts in zip code 232. So I would be on crime scenes, and my job was to look for the victim and notify them of resources that was available to them and for them, and really provide just a human, you know, some warmth as they're going through such tragedy of gun violence and even knife, you know, stabbings and things like that. One of the things that I saw working over, our main site was Greater Southeast, I'm sorry, UMC, United Medical Center. We were stationed there. I was stationed over there from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. So as it relates to right now, my position with the Alliance of Concerned Men, I'm a lead credible messenger for the Department of Youth and Rehabilitation Services. So I'm a family engagement specialist, liaison. Right now, what I think as it relates to your question, one of the things I think is, you know, hurt people, you know, and heal people. So I think it's so important as it relates to the checking the intentions of a person, as it relates to going out into the community and doing this work. I think a lot of times, even as we look at the police reform, you know, we have to check the intentions of the police and why they're there, right? And why they say, hey, I want to be a police officer, you know,
right.
and what does that mean for them, right? Because just as the police is shooting people out of fear, right? So many people are walking around in fear, you know? So it's really one of those things of like, when I was growing up, I remember Officer Friendly. And like I said, I talked about how I was traumatized by the police in my own home, just going to the bathroom. I didn't have to go outside. They came to my house. So I think it's really about getting to know the needs of the community, because poverty is really the reason for violence, right? I mean, you hungry, you know, you're jealous, people walking around with all this name brand stuff. So I think it's really about getting into the community and understanding the needs of the community. You know, that's what the Alliance of Concerned Men, what we're doing over in the Highland area with the Cure the Streets. You know, we're over there, and one of the biggest things that I see that's working is getting to know the community. Like, you know who that young man is, and you built a relationship. You're not just coming around when they did something wrong. So I think it's, you know, that preventive service, right? That preventive measures, right? Going out and, you know, really understanding that these are people who really want the same things as everyone else. We want safe environments. We want, you know, we want a great school. We want all of these things. And even the people that's doing this violence, I really truly believe that that's not what they want to do. You know, I don't think people wake up and say, you know, and really say, hey, I'm about to kill somebody today. You know, when you think about mental illness and all of these things that comes into place, and people are hungry, like literally, you know, people are going without eating. And then when you are saturating our community with drugs, I'm in the process of now of doing a documentary about crack and where we at now, right? Because again, I lost my mom in '94. I lost my sister to a dipper overdose in 2013. So there's nothing changing. You know, we saw my mom in a room because of that chemical warfare. And then you have a lot of children that still, you know how they say reaping the benefits of what they did, but that's not a benefit, right? You got the linger of that crack, and now they still putting more drugs into the community. So I think hopefully I answered your question. It's just so many. I don't think it's just one thing that can fix it. There's not one way. I think that it's really going to take all of us to have your heart in it. And if your heart is not, I always say something everybody can do. It's something you can do, even if it's just a smile, right? That energy. And if we speak out our mouth that our community is deserving of these things, and we don't speak bad about our community. And that's one of the things that we do with the Alliance of Concerned Men and Mama Safe Havens. We speak life into the community. And not only that, but we give a voice to the voiceless, you know, and that's one of the things. Another initiative that I'm excited about is Voices of Black Mothers United. And you all will hear more about that. I'm the chapter lead for the DMV, and we're working around police reform with the Bob Woodson Center. And we have a press conference that's coming out Friday, and we're launching our Voices of Black Mothers United and working with the police as it relates to what that looks like. And then proper policing. So we also have an initiative called 119. It's a hotline that people can call and report bad policing. So it's so important for us, one, to understand the needs of the community. Mama Safe Haven, we have a 40-question needs assessment. And we did not put it online because we want to talk to the people to get to know them as a person. We're not putting it in a Google Doc or anything like that. You know, we go door to door and get this information. So I think it's really time for us to go and really check ourselves, the people who's doing this work, and ask yourself why, right? And then go out with the right intent. And if you're not ready to do it, if you feel scared, then just stay in the house and call people, right? Or just smile or cook dinner for someone. Like, it's something everybody can do, but I don't think everybody, you know, so many people just want to, you know, be out on the front line. But I think, you know, people can feel when you're just doing a job, right? And that's one of the things, I don't know if y'all saw that crack documentary, but that's one of the things they said about the police. Like, I remember that. Some police didn't even care. They like, let them kill themselves. They gonna kill each other off anyway, you know, that kind of thing. So the people can feel when you're there just doing a job, you know, and when you're just trying to collect a check. So I think it's really, it's gonna take heal people to heal people, you know, and that can look like in so many different things, because one, you have to meet the people where they are. And I think a lot of people, you know, they just looking at what they did instead of, you know, their needs. So I hope that answered.
I really appreciate there's so much context in what you've shared, my sister, and it's rich. We can talk more and more, but I think the main thing I wanted to pull out for the commissioners is that there is capacity within our community of people who live in our community, who are from our community, who are survivors, even like Commissioner Front, our sister Tina, who know our community firsthand and are accountable to our community in ways that the officers are not. And so certainly it is the position of many commissioners on this commission to put more resources into those capacity building healers in our community, as opposed to people who, as I saw Brother Hampton just said, there's no training for what you're talking about in the academy. Our officers are not showing up in that way. And so it's important.
No, what I wanted to say was, my brother, is that what Beverly is talking about, they don't teach police officers in the academy to be like that. But now, if you want them to be like that, then you need to be intentional in the instructions and education of officers, and then what you teach and educate them, then it will manifest in them when they're out there doing the job in the community.
Yeah.
If the community and the care of the community and the existence of the community is number one, then that's what you teach in the academy. But that isn't what they teach in the academy. Now let's be real. So when they come out of the academy, they do exactly what they are trained to do.
Can I say something to that as well? One of the things I found out in working at the hospital, and I don't know if this is going to help or what, but one of the things, you know, I was traumatized at UMC. My mom, all three of my sisters died right there at Greater Southeast. It was a time where I couldn't even ride past that hospital. And then when I got the job at the Lions of Concerned Men and they told me that that was where my work site was at, I was just blown. I was like, Lord, what are you doing? You know, so I'm in the emergency room, literally where I had to identify my sister's body. My mom, like I said, all three of my sisters died right at that. So I was traumatized. But one of the things I thought about was the importance of us being there because we were human. And the doctors had to be doctors. They couldn't show that, you know, and I had to learn that through violence interruption. I had the honor and the pleasure of going to California with the violence interrupters from people all over the world. I mean, doctors, it was just an amazing week-long conference. And it was doctors there. So I had an opportunity to speak to them about that. But and one of the things I realized is that, you know, they have to, you know, with police officers, they have to be a certain kind of way for that respect. And I found that out about doctors, but I think the partnership of someone who understands the community is something that I think that we can bring and better. So I don't think that we should remove the police. You know, I just want to say that I don't think that defunding the police is the way to go. I think that if we can work together and bring in a committee of people, and that's where the Voices of Black Mothers United is working together to do, is to really, and what you all, you know, what we're doing right now, right, is to talk about how can we better work with the police in the community to make it safer for everyone. So, and you know, just to sum that up is just the importance of community and people who have been, you know, we call us credible messengers at DYS. And I think that's what's needed, even as it relates to police reform. You need those credible messengers who have been inside, have been affected by the ills of the police, you know, and haven't been protected, but can be there to kind of support those people and help as it relates to bringing some human to policing.
All right, were there any other, did any other commissioners have comments or questions for our panelists? We're at about 8:03, so I know we're a couple minutes past our time, but I just wanted to make sure before we wrap up. All right, well, hearing none, I will, Christy or Bob, if you want to close out.
I'll let Bob close. I just do want to say thank you to all of our panelists. They were really wonderful. It was really, really wonderful to hear from you. And also to Commissioner Front for sharing the information she shared with us. Really helped round out some of the context to the information we've been hearing from others over the past several weeks. So thank you all for being here and for speaking so eloquently and insightfully about these really important issues.
Yes, I'd like to thank all the panelists also for their insight and their expertise in coming before the commission tonight and giving their, you know, candid recommendations and thoughts. And the one thing that is very impressive, Christy, is that members of our commission, in particular, listening to Tina and others, you know, we have tremendous expertise on this commission, and it's heartening. I mean, it's exciting, it's frustrating, but at the same time, it's at the end of the day, we will advance recommendations for our community, in our district, in our city, that we're going to have to advocate very strongly for those recommendations to be advanced, not just in the police, but also in the broader community as well. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you everyone. And thank you again to our panelists. We really appreciate your time and the expertise that you bring and the experiences that you brought to the table. We will have more about our next full commission meeting next month. But in the meantime, the schedule for committee meetings is on the DC Police Reform Commission website. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Blessings.
Peace, everybody. Good night.